The Egyptian tradition described millennia ago something your life confirms every single day. The same patterns that govern a galaxy govern your messy drawer. The same cycles that move civilizations move your failed relationships. You divorce the same type of person, lose the same type of job, attract the same conflict decade after decade, and keep believing they are coincidences. The Kybalion records 2001 levels of existence between rock and the divine. Your identity does not correspond to where your body is, but to the level where your consciousness vibrates. Life sends letters about what you need to learn. You tear them all up without reading. The problem was never a lack of intelligence. It was vital illiteracy. You master numbers, letters, and codes, but the language through which existence communicates with you remains a tongue you never bothered to learn.
There is a phrase engraved in Egyptian thought that has crossed millennia without losing a drop of relevance. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. The principle of correspondence, the second of the 7 great Hermetic axioms preserved in the Kybalion. A key that opens doors on every floor of existence at the same time. It teaches that the same laws operate on every plane of the manifest universe, from the densest matter to the most subtle spiritual dimensions. No plane has exclusive laws. The patterns that manifest on one level reveal equivalent patterns on all others. But correspondence does not mean absolute identity. The same law adapts to each circumstance, wearing colors appropriate to each level. The relationship is proportional, like the same melody played on a cello and a flute, different texture, identical score. The law remains unchanged. What changes is the garment. A simple example reveals this dynamic with almost uncomfortable clarity. Imagine someone wanting to transmit an important message in the era of traditional mail. This person sends a letter in a long yellow envelope. The recipient doesn't like the color yellow, tears it up and throws it away. A new letter arrives, green and square envelope, also discarded. Another letter, blue this time, same fate. Every new envelope carries the exact same letter. Until the recipient opens and reads, the letters will keep arriving. The sender's patience has no expiration date. Nature operates in exactly this way with each one of us. Life sends messages about what we need to learn, about the lessons that correspond to our evolutionary moment, and many times we remain trapped in the same repetitive situations throughout an entire existence, without realizing that it is the same message wearing different clothes. We divorce the same type of person 3 times. We lose the same type of job for strangely similar reasons. We attract the same conflict with authority figures decade after decade. Contemporary materialist superficiality leads us to see only the external appearances, ignoring the symbolic content that remains constant beneath all of them. Something curious and rather cruel. We can perceive these repetitive patterns far more easily in other people's lives than in our own. We watch the neighbor, the co-worker, repeating the same mistakes for decades, and we stand bewildered at their blindness. Someone is probably watching our life with the same bewilderment. The building doorman probably knows exactly which lessons we keep repeating without learning. What makes this principle uncomfortable is watching it operate in someone close to you. A case from college days illustrates this with uncomfortable sharpness. A classmate had an almost supernatural radar for getting involved with people of bad character. She lived in an endless cycle of victimization. Everyone around her could see the pattern with astonishing ease. It was as if she carried a billboard on her head flashing, "Criminal, I'm right here." Everyone saw it. She didn't. And she believed that mysterious forces were conspiring against her happiness. The forces were there, no doubt, but they were transparent to any external observer. Only she couldn't read what life had been saying for years. The pattern repeated over years. Different boyfriends, same dynamic, same pain. and she kept destroying the packaging without ever examining what was inside. We do this all the time, each in our own way. And the most disturbing part, with the same conviction that we are different. This is where the principle stops being philosophical and starts being personal. The principle of correspondence reveals that disorder on one plane reflects disorder on all others. The messy drawer is not just a messy drawer, it is a visible symbol of something far broader. The lack of mental focus manifests in the disorganized closet, the chaotic desk, the chaos of the physical environment. One mirrors the other because they obey the same law. Whoever claims to be disorganized in only one aspect is deceiving themselves. Disorder permeates all planes simultaneously. The drawer functions as a three-dimensional mirror of the state of mind, the emotions, the internal clarity of whoever lives in that space. Reorganizing the drawer without reorganizing the mind is changing the color of the envelope without reading the letter. The drawer will be messy again within a week. The source of the disorder was never physical. Learning to read these symbols allows us to identify the elements that imprison us in repetitive cycles. And this is the silent tragedy that marks most human existences. We live surrounded by messages, encircled by symbols that life constantly presents, and we remain unable to decipher them. We are vital illiterates, not for lack of intelligence, for lack of consciousness. We master the language of numbers, letters, and digital codes. But the symbolic language through which existence communicates with every human being remains a foreign tongue. We never took the trouble to learn. Have you stopped to think about how many of these letters you tore up just this week? The principle of correspondence offers the beginning of an alphabet. It doesn't solve everything at once. It doesn't transform anyone overnight. But it allows, for the first time, looking at the drawer, at the relationship, at the pattern that insists on returning, and recognizing the message that was always embedded in the repetition. A message that was there from the beginning, patiently waiting to be read. Egyptian tradition, the philosophical foundation of the Kybalion, conceived the manifest universe as composed of three fundamental dimensions: the spiritual world, the mental world, and the material world. Three planes that encompass everything that exists, from the densest atom to the existence of the most elevated archangel. But do not imagine them as separate floors of a building. That is the trap the contemporary mind sets for itself. The three planes do not exist in different locations. They completely interpenetrate, occupying the same space, vibrating at different density gradients. The separation between them serves only the student who needs categories. We draw borders on the map to facilitate study, but the territory itself has no dividing line. A concrete image helps to understand this. Think of an electrical conductor wire. The copper wire and the electric current flowing through it occupy exactly the same physical place, the same point in space, yet they possess completely distinct frequencies. The physical matter of the copper and the electrical energy coexist there, but belong to different realities of density. You can touch the copper, the electricity, you cannot. Both are there. For Egyptian philosophy, determining the true location of something requires knowing its vibratory level, not just its spatial coordinates. I remember the exact walk home when this clicked. 3 blocks from my door, distracted, when the full weight of it landed without warning. Vibration, according to the Kybalion, functions as a kind of fourth dimension. Beyond length, width, and height, there exists the degree of vibratory frequency, and it is this degree that defines the plane where something or someone truly resides. Science partially recognizes this idea when it speaks of electromagnetic frequencies, sound waves, molecular vibrations. But Hermeticism extends the principle far beyond what conventional physics accepts. Vibration determines not only the properties of matter, but the very plane of existence of each being. 1,000 beings can occupy the same physical point, each vibrating in a completely different manner. The true identity of each being corresponds entirely to the level where its consciousness vibrates, a coordinate beyond any physical map. How many times does someone have a distant friend on the other side of the world who seems infinitely closer than the next door neighbor? This feeling is not illusory, it points to something real. Physical space is one thing, vibratory space, something completely different. People seated side by side on a bus can have their consciousnesses in absolutely distinct places on this scale. They share the same seat and inhabit parallel universes, 10 centimeters of physical distance, and an entire galaxy of vibratory distance. Two people sharing a seat and inhabiting different galaxies. I have never looked at a crowded subway the same way since. All of us participate simultaneously in the three planes: physical, mental, and spiritual. This is no one's privilege. Even a stone, according to the Egyptian tradition, possesses a spiritual dimension. The crucial difference lies in the degree of consciousness each being has reached within this threefold structure. An everyday situation illustrates this with disconcerting clarity. Imagine being at the supermarket, hungry, with money in your pocket, but without knowing that the money is there. The practical value of this resource is zero. The money is there, the food is available, the hunger is real. But the absence of awareness about the money makes everything irrelevant. You could have $100 or 100 million. If you don't know they are there, you go hungry just the same. Things work for us to the exact extent that we are conscious of them. This applies to every grocery run, every conversation, every decision you make today. It serves no purpose, then, for physical, mental, and spiritual planes to exist if individual consciousness has reached only the physical level, or at most, the mental. For practical purposes, the planes not accessed by consciousness simply do not exist for that being. The money in the pocket remains useless as long as no one knows it is there. The spiritual dimension remains inaccessible as long as consciousness has not awakened to perceive it. But this does not mean that someone is devoid of spirit. Everyone possesses this dimension. Consciousness has not yet awakened to register this reality. And what is not registered is not utilized. A person blind from birth is surrounded by colors, shapes, and landscapes. They exist around them in all their fullness. For their concrete experience, however, the visual world simply does not exist. The problem lies entirely in the absence of perception. We are blind to entire dimensions of our own existence, without even suspecting it. Sit with that for a second before moving on. According to the Kybalion, these three planes are not categories invented by philosophers. They are ascending degrees of a single scale of life, whose lowest point is undifferentiated matter and whose highest point is pure spirit. Between these two extremes, a continuous scale of vibrations, without jumps, without demarcated borders, without customs between one plane and another. The most subtle matter of the physical plane blends into the densest manifestations of the mental plane. The most elevated manifestations of the mental plane touch the lowest of the spiritual plane. The transition is gradual, imperceptible, like the gradient between two colors merging in a sunset. Everything interpenetrates, everything coexists, and the position of each being on this scale does not depend on where they were born, what religion they practice, or how many books they have read. It depends on one thing: the degree of consciousness conquered through their own merit. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the existence of the archangel are steps on the same staircase. The difference between them is not one of nature, it is one of frequency. The Egyptian myth of Osiris carries the essence of the Hermetic understanding of evolution and human identity. Osiris, the great god of fertile earth and life, falls into a trap set by his brother Seth. His body is torn into 14 fragments and scattered along the Nile. Isis, his wife, undertakes the arduous task of collecting each dispersed piece, reuniting them once more. In the form of a bird, she unites with the reconstituted body and gives birth to Horus, a son who bears traits of both father and mother. The first layer is direct. The myth symbolizes the union of spirit father with matter mother, generating the human being who inherits characteristics of both. The paternal traits manifest when we act with justice, kindness, and honesty. The maternal traits appear in beauty, harmony, and the capacity for organization. The great human task consists of traveling the Nile, collecting the pieces of the father to reunify him. In practical terms, this means finding the divine in all things, recognizing the presence of God in every fragment of the universe, in every situation, in every living being. Each piece collected brings with it a portion of understanding. And the complete path along the Nile, which lasts entire existences, is the path of those who reconstruct within themselves the totality of the sacred. But there is a deeper layer. When Osiris fragments, a small piece of him remains inside every being in the universe. Every creature carries this spark within. All external vehicles, the physical body, the emotions, the thoughts, function as temporary packaging that will eventually wear out and die. True identity resides in this cell of Osiris's body, in the immortal divine essence that traverses time, always evolving, becoming progressively more conscious of itself. Some traditions call this the monad, the indestructible divine seed that inhabits every being. I would not have connected these two things if I had not been reading about the Cassini mission that same week. But once the parallel formed, I could not unsee it. In January 2005, the Cassini spacecraft remained in orbit around Saturn when its daughter probe, Huygens, began its descent through the atmospheric layers of Titan, the planet's largest moon. The probe had traveled 6 years attached to the mothership before being released for its solo mission. Over 2.5 hours, Huygens traversed each density layer of Titan's atmosphere. It recorded data, photographed formations never seen by human eyes, measured temperatures, chemical composition, atmospheric pressure in each layer it pierced, until it landed on the frozen surface of that distant moon, more than 1 billion kilometers from Earth. The most distant landing ever achieved by humanity, the mothership never descended. It remained up there, in stable orbit, receiving everything Huygens transmitted. Every bit of information captured during the descent was immediately relayed upward. Cassini collected everything, without moving from its post. Now imagine that piece of Osiris's body, the monad, the essence of every being, corresponds to the Cassini spacecraft. It never abandoned its orbit. It never left the spiritual plane. What it sent downward was the probe, consciousness. It sent it to descend to the densest levels of matter, traverse each layer, observe, record, learn the laws of each stratum. Exactly as Huygens traversed Titan's haze layer by layer, consciousness descends plane by plane, accumulating experience that the essence could never obtain without leaving its post. Evolution is nothing more than evolution of consciousness. What we are, in essence, we have always been and always will be, a cell of Osiris's body, a monad. The essence has remained identical since the beginning. What accumulates, grows, and expands with each descent is the consciousness projected downward. This consciousness descended to the densest levels, traversed the mineral kingdom, recorded its laws, transmitted the information upward, then the vegetable kingdom, then the animal. At each stage, new laws assimilated, new capabilities incorporated, new memories accumulated in the mothership. Plato called this process reminiscence. Every genuine insight feels less like discovery and more like recognition. Consciousness encountering records it already stored during previous descents. The accumulated memories of each plane traversed confer mastery over the laws of that level. Those who have passed through the mineral carry within themselves knowledge of the laws of cohesion, crystallization, chemical affinity. Those who have passed through the vegetable know the laws of vitality, growth, cyclical renewal. Each stage lived expands the repertoire of the ascending consciousness. And when it finally returns to the point of departure, it brings with it a richness that did not exist before the descent. The monad did not change, but now it knows. There is a strange comfort in this, the certainty that nothing recorded during the descent is ever lost. Stop and think about this for a second. The Huygens probe never returned from Titan. Its batteries expired on the frozen surface after transmitting for just over an hour after landing. But every fragment of information captured during the descent was preserved in the memory of the mothership. Nothing was lost. The probe died. The data survived. And everything Cassini received permanently expanded our understanding of that distant world. We are Huygens descending through the layers. The monad is Cassini waiting in orbit, and each life lived with its pains, achievements, failures, and discoveries is a transmission, data that the mothership collects, processes, and integrates. Nothing is wasted. No experience is useless. Even the most absurd suffering carries information that expands the total consciousness of the being. If every experience is data transmitted upward, even failure, even heartbreak, what exactly qualifies as a wasted life? Among the kingdoms we know, mineral, vegetable, animal, human, the Egyptian tradition positions something that modern science ignores entirely: the so-called elemental kingdoms, groups of beings without dense bodies, endowed with subtle bodies and a kind of mechanical intelligence. They function as small robots programmed to perform functions within nature. Cosmic enzymes working silently behind the scenes of creation. Two parallel evolutionary lines exist, according to tradition. The human line goes from mineral to vegetable, from vegetable to animal, from animal to human, with the predestination from the very beginning to reach the human condition, endowed with dense and visible bodies. Parallel to this exists the Devic line, composed of support beings who work helping to construct nature's most complex phenomena. The two lines walk side by side, complementing each other. One executes, the other assists in the execution. They complement each other like score and musician. Without the score, the musician improvises aimlessly. Without the musician, the score remains silent paper. Insect mimicry offers an example that forces us to stop and think. Observing the cognitive level of a butterfly or a stick insect, it seems absolutely impossible that the insect itself developed such resemblance to leaves, twigs, or tree bark. The engineering behind this disguise, the texture, the coloration, the exact shape of a leaf's veins reproduced on wings, far exceeds the brain capacity of the animal displaying it. Where does this intelligence come from? Who designed this? A brain the size of a grain of sand does not draw veins with this millimetric precision. I remember staring at a leaf insect in a nature documentary and asking myself, what intelligence is responsible for this level of precision? Something far beyond that tiny brain was at work. According to the Hermetic tradition, the elementals. These subtle brains operate behind the scenes of nature, organizing processes that exceed the individual capacity of beings on the human line. The art director is invisible, but the scenery is impeccable. Elementals inhabit the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Yet this nomenclature carries a symbolic meaning that goes far beyond the surface. Earth represents the concrete physical plane, everything that can be touched and measured. Water symbolizes the energetic plane, encompassing life, electricity, magnetism, all forms of energy circulating in the universe, hence the natural fluidity of the term. Air corresponds to the emotional plane, with its natural tendency toward whirlwinds and turbulence, but also gentle breezes and calms. Fire represents the creative mind, transmuting and revealing, the flame that transforms everything it touches. 4 simple words, 4 entire universes. First-level elementals assist in the elaboration of the mineral kingdom. They help molecular organization until it achieves structures like the diamond, raw matter transformed into perfect geometry through pressure and time with invisible assistance. Second-level elementals organize the vegetable kingdom, conducting vital processes until they reach complex forms like dicotyledons with their deep roots and sophisticated vascular systems. Third-level elementals help the animal kingdom develop capabilities, such as the mimicry we mentioned, the sophisticated behaviors of mammals, migrations of thousands of kilometers without a visible compass. From the human stage onward, endowed with free will, no elemental can interfere any longer. Development becomes individual through one's own merit. It is as if the scaffolding were removed and the building had to support itself. From that moment on, responsibility governs alone, and with it, the risk of error, which is also the only way to earn real merit. Now consider the skeptic's position. Descriptions of these beings carry a universality that defies any conventional explanation. In the Amazon, indigenous tribes describe beings remarkably similar to those in Homer's Odyssey or European alchemical treatises: undines, fairies, elves, with physically convergent descriptions, shapes, colors, sizes, behaviors. Everything coincides in a disconcerting manner. Water beings described with feminine and transparent traits, both on the banks of the Amazon and in Norwegian fjords. Fire beings identified as salamanders in traditions separated by 5,000 years and 10,000 kilometers. Peoples separated by oceans, millennia, and insurmountable linguistic barriers, reporting practically identical experiences. It seems unlikely that an Amazonian indigenous person read the Aeneid. Scandinavian, Egyptian, Indian, and Greek mythologies speak of these beings with details that overlap in a disturbing way. Each culture gave them different names, created different stories around them. But when the cultural garment is removed and the pure descriptions are compared, the convergence is undeniable. Something must exist there that different civilizations, in different eras, separated by entire continents, managed to perceive in some way. Have you stopped to think about what it would take for isolated tribes on opposite corners of the planet to describe the same beings with the same traits? Correspondence operates between the planes of the universe, but it also operates between the witnesses. And when witnesses who never crossed paths describe the same thing with the same richness of detail, the collective testimony gains a weight that is difficult to ignore. Correspondence, once again, connects what seemed disconnected. Chapter 8 of the Kybalion presents a table that deserves prolonged attention. It details the 7 subplanes of each of the 3 worlds, 21 steps in total, from the densest mineral to the most elevated divine. Some concepts need to be clarified before entering the details. For Hermeticism, matter and energy are not different things. Matter is energy vibrating at a lower frequency. Energy is matter vibrating at a higher frequency, like ice and steam, different states of the same substance, determined by the amount of molecular movement. By progressively accelerating vibration, consciousness leaves matter, enters mind, then spirit, until reaching the divine level. It all comes down to vibratory speed. What appears to be an infinite diversity of substances, forces, and beings results from a single variable, frequency. The material plane divides into 7 levels. Matter A encompasses what we know: solids, liquids, and gases the matter found in physics textbooks. Matter B covers more subtle forms called radiant matter, which current science has barely begun to recognize in its laboratories. Matter C represents even more tenuous states, completely unknown to available instrumentation. Then comes the ether, that substance of extreme elasticity that penetrates the entire universe, mediating waves and energies. The Kybalion teaches that there are 7 different types of ether. Science may have glimpsed this reality in what it calls dark matter or dark energy, already 4 levels deep, and we have left the territory of anything a laboratory can measure. Then come the energies. Energy A, electricity, light, heat, magnetism, gravitation, all the forces science has catalogued. Energy B, more subtle forces acting in mental phenomena, the so-called finer forces of nature. And energy C, energy so highly organized that it possesses characteristics of life, accessible only to beings of the spiritual plane, unthinkable for the common human mind. 7 steps on the physical plane alone, and most of us barely know the first. On the mental plane, the sequence reveals something unexpected. It begins with the mineral mind. All processes of expansion, contraction, and chemical affinity represent intelligence operating at the most basic level. Atoms have preferences, molecules have affinities, crystals follow geometries that no law of chance can satisfactorily explain. The Kybalion itself observes that atoms possess loves and hates, likes and dislikes, and that many modern scientific minds have already expressed similar views. Then comes the first elemental kingdom, followed by the vegetable mind, responsible for all vital phenomena of plants. The most evolved plants already demonstrate something resembling emotional sensitivity. Hence the phenomenon of the green thumb, people with whom plants flourish without apparent explanation. There is even a striking observation. Plants respond positively to Baroque music, especially Bach. The consistency of these reports across continents and generations demands attention. Then come the second elemental kingdom, the animal mind working with survival and perpetuation of the species, the third elemental kingdom, and finally the human mind with its 7 sub-levels of its own. The Kybalion compares the elemental kingdoms to the black keys of a piano. The white keys produce music on their own, but certain harmonies only become complete when the black keys join in. I had to put the book down for a moment here. Most of humanity finds itself between the 4th and 5th step of the human mind. Few have surpassed the 5th. However, since human evolution occurs through individual merit, some beings have accelerated tremendously, reaching the 6th and 7th degree. These are the sages that history has recorded. And almost all share one characteristic: they evolved through fraternity. They became beacons for those who come behind. One rarely finds in history a genuinely selfish sage. Where the human ends, the spiritual plane begins. Masters and adepts, beings who completed everything the human condition could teach, occupy the first step. And Egyptian mentality carries a surprise about the scale involved. Even Hermes Trismegistus, the most revered figure of Egypt, would occupy only this first spiritual step. If someone asked, "Where is Hermes Trismegistus?" the answer would be, there, on the first spiritual step. He still has a long way to go. The humility of the scale is vertiginous. Every spiritual teacher I encountered after learning this suddenly looked less impressive and far more courageous. Then follow hierarchies that the Kybalion calls angelic hosts, progressively purer, until levels that the book itself describes only as divine, because no other human word can come close. Beings whose attributes remain unimaginable to our minds. The Kybalion admits that attempting to describe these planes would be like explaining colors to someone born blind, or sweetness to someone who has never tasted anything sweet. 21 steps, a staircase that goes from stone to the unspeakable, and each step contains 7 internal subdivisions totaling 147 sublevels of existence. Let that number land, 147. The complexity seems overwhelming, but the principle that governs all of them is 1. Correspondence. The same laws at every height, the same rules at every density. And this uniformity is precisely what makes the study of these laws so valuable, because what is learned on one step applies to all others. Where on this staircase do you sense yourself standing right now? All 7 Hermetic principles, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, gender, operate in all 3 worlds and their 21 subplanes. Without exception, no plane possesses an exclusive law. The laws traverse all levels of manifestation, assuming particular colorations for each circumstance, but remaining essentially the same. Polarity operates in the atom and in the archangel. Rhythm governs tides and civilizations. Cause and effect knows no borders between planes. Those who can see beyond the superficial colors find these laws operating in every corner of the universe, including within themselves. Such universality carries an enormous practical implication. Truly understanding these laws makes them useful regardless of one's current evolutionary level. They work for the mineral, for the vegetable, for the human, for the spiritual master. This is why the Kybalion considers them worth the effort of study. It is an investment that yields dividends in any future circumstance, on any plane of existence that consciousness may come to inhabit. What is learned here accompanies the monad forever. But there is a side of this coin that no one likes to examine. Spiritual knowledge has always remained reserved for the few throughout history, not through arbitrary elitism, but through a logic that becomes evident once understood. Beings in evolution need to pass tests at every level. If everything came for free, without effort, there would be no merit whatsoever. Overcoming difficulties generates evolutionary merit. And for merit to exist in a choice, there must exist the possibility of error. With 10 alternatives available, choosing the correct one deserves congratulations. With a single alternative, the right choice has no value at all. Without the real possibility of failure, success loses all meaning. At every level there are tests, difficulties to overcome, possibility of failure. And the more knowledge someone accumulates, the more dangerous a potential deviation becomes. Knowledge confers power, and power in the hands of those who have placed self-interest above everything else can cause damage proportional to the knowledge they possess. An ordinary person acting from selfishness causes limited harm. A sage acting from selfishness can devastate. Something the Kybalion mentions almost in passing. A single paragraph that sat with me for longer than the rest of the chapter combined. A highly evolved being who at a given moment fails the tests and opts for selfishness can use all their accumulated knowledge for destructive purposes. And myths throughout history record this possibility with an insistence that deserves attention. The fallen angels, Lucifer, the bearer of light who rebelled, beings who had reached immense heights and lost their way in an instant of weakness. The Kybalion approaches these stories with absolute seriousness, treating them as the description of a real mechanism, the pendulum of rhythm that inevitably pushes them back to the densest extreme of material existence. The higher the step reached, the longer and more painful the fall. And with an aggravating factor, the memory of what they lost accompanies them throughout the entire descent. A being becomes all the more dangerous the more it knows. Read that again slowly. Deep knowledge was guarded within temples, orders, and fraternities across millennia for this reason, not through miserliness, through prudence, and through responsibility to all beings who could be affected if this knowledge fell into the wrong hands. But the reverse is also true, and it is there that the Kybalion's deepest hope resides. Even beings who have reached the maximum level of spiritual wisdom remain to assist those who come after. They have completed everything the physical world could teach: pleasure, pain, conquest, loss. All of it lies behind them. They remain out of pure mercy, out of fraternity, because those who truly evolve for the whole, and thinking only of one's own existence prevents any real advancement. Selfishness is the handbrake of evolution. That detail, that they choose to stay, was the part that lodged deepest. We walk toward the one, and to get there, we must become progressively more unity, defeat separatism at every step, expand the circle of care until it embraces first the family, then the community, then the species, then all living beings, then everything that exists. Evolution is a symptom that the being thinks ever more like the whole, because it walks toward the whole. Ask yourself honestly, at this point in your life, is the circle of what you care about expanding or contracting? Studying the Kybalion invites each person to find these laws operating in their own life, to identify where they infringe upon them and where they harmonize with them. The level of understanding reached corresponds directly to the inner maturity conquered. The same book, reread 10 years later, with real growth in consciousness, will seem like a completely different work, opening doors that previously remained invisible, revealing layers that were not even suspected to exist upon first reading. This is the invitation, and also the test. The principle of correspondence teaches that the same patterns operate at every level. If these laws govern the entire universe, they also govern the human mind. And if they govern the mind, they can be used to align consciousness and purpose. We have developed audio tools based on frequencies that work directly with this alignment, preparing the mind to function as the ancient Hermeticists described, a receiver attuned to universal laws. To discover how to activate this process and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me."